so shortly after. So I wanted to go over the supervisor travel policy that at the March commission meeting, there were some changes approved to the policy. The biggest change being on page 2. Get down to page 2. For any new supervisors, or it could be supervisors that are on board and have not completed any paperwork, but all supervisors who wish to be reimbursed, that we are requiring that all the documentation, I-9 tax forms, be submitted to our office within 60 days of completing their oath of office. And if we don't get it before those 60 days, we will only be paying for meetings after we receive the paperwork. A lot of time is going by between us receiving that paperwork, and then a supervisor may want to be reimbursed for a meeting that was 6 months prior, and we really need to get that paperwork in here in a timely manner. So it's going to go to our website and show you which forms that we're talking about. The supervisor forms travel page, this first section here is all the forms that we need from a new supervisor, the I-9, this employment understanding and decision of payment waiver form, the W-4, NC-4. We need the copies of the documentation that they use to verify their employment on the I-9. And we also have to have a copy of the Social Security card in order to enter them in our payroll system. And then we also need the direct deposit information. So on this webpage in red, there are examples of some of these forms on how they should be completed. Does anybody have any questions about that part? I have Christina is monitoring our chat for us if anybody had any questions.
I don't see any questions, Megan, but just a question came today by email. Those forms have to be mailed into Raleigh. We don't collect them through SharePoint. You guys need
the next session, that section of the policy that had some updates was on page 4 under other meetings. So the typical, meetings that we usually pay for consistently are, your monthly district board meeting, the annual meeting, area meetings, the district supervisor training. But sometimes we get asked to pay for other meetings. So this section was modified saying that if the board members wanted to be reimbursed for a specially called meeting, that prior written approval should be obtained from the commission or the division director, Vernon Cox. So we get a lot of these requests after the fact, and they should be approved prior to any special meetings. And this just goes back to at the beginning of the policy, there's a breakdown in how the funds are spent for supervisor training. And you can see, a lot of it is directed toward the monthly meetings and annual meetings. And so in order to pay for these other meetings, we need to make sure that there's money in the budget so that we continue paying for those other meetings. So they need to be approved prior to requesting reimbursement.
428 to 430. All right.
Those are the biggest changes. There were some wording changes in here as, like the supervisor basic training used to be called the
Yeah, you
UNC
wanna
School of
come up with
Government.
the,
So this policy
up in the
just,
front
it needed some
first, come in
updating.
here, fill out
A
the
lot of the
application and
changes
everything,
over
and
the
then
years,
Graham will
but
go with you down to the.
those were the two
Place.
things that were directly affected by the approved policy change. Are there any questions about any of that?
This is Mary Beth. I was just curious about what Christina was saying about the forms. And maybe it got cut off. I didn't hear it, but
Okay, so a couple of things that I wanted to point out in the policy that we're just seeing as timesheets and travel reimbursements are coming in. A big one is the cover sheet. So we get asked a lot about if a cover sheet needs to be sent in for each meeting. And the answer is yes, a separate cover sheet. So as a little backstory, prior to us using this cover sheet, you used to be required to send in a copy of your draft minutes before they were approved. In order for us to pay the board members their reimbursement, we need to know who attended the meeting so that we know they were eligible to be reimbursed. And so a few years back, we came up with the cover sheet as just a simpler, quicker way than everyone having to send in their draft minutes. So we do need a cover sheet for each meeting so we know who attended those meetings. That's on page 3, this section. Page 3, it's page 4. I wrote the page number down wrong, but it's section 3, number C. No, I'm sorry, it's number 2, section B, where it explains the cover sheet. And then when your meeting minutes are approved, they should be uploaded to the SharePoint site as soon as possible. And then one other thing we've noticed with the area meetings for the spring, in the policy for area meetings, no meals are to be reimbursed. It is the per diem and the registration fee not to exceed $30. We did receive some that we're requesting reimbursement for $35. And the max we can reimburse is $30, and meals are not eligible for reimbursement for area meetings per the travel policy. So I was gonna go back to our website here, and we do, on this forms page, there's a link to the supervisor travel policy, and then under this section are all the forms that you would use for travel reimbursement, and this step-by-step guidance explains exactly how to fill out the timesheet and a travel reimbursement for overnight stay. It goes through each box that would need to be filled out and the amounts. So that's a good form to refer back to when like annual meeting and things like that aren't done on a regular basis. The cover sheet is here, the timesheet, a travel reimbursement form for registration fees, the annual meeting, supervisor basic training, and then this form is used for any board member that is also a state employee. This is the only form that you would use. And then the supervisor travel form I'm sorry, Casey's telling me y'all are talking and I can't hear anybody talking. Let's see. Okay, somebody say something now. I'm sorry, everybody.
Hey, Megan, it's Christina. Can you hear me?
No, I don't know what was wrong. Sorry, everyone.
No, that's okay. Yeah, go ahead and we'll go back to questions when you get to the point where you're ready to take them.
Okay, no, you can go ahead. Go ahead now.
Oh,
We don't want
Just
to.
one quick going back to the I-9 and the tax forms that you pointed out a little while ago. It's my understanding that you guys need the original paperwork in Raleigh on that, right? It's not something that can be uploaded through SharePoint.
Right, that's correct. We have to have the original documents and they're sent to our HR department to keep on file. So everything has to be original. And then the tax forms are sent to our payroll office.
All right, great. Thank you for clarifying that.
Was there another question? I'm sorry, I can't believe I wasn't hearing everybody.
No, that's okay. We just, you were rolling right along and everybody's listening. So go ahead. Thank you so much.
Okay, so this next form I was going to talk about, this supervisor travel form to use chart. I would say this is, to me, one of the most useful forms. When we started having to do timesheets and travel reimbursements, it got a little confusing on which form was to be used for which meeting. So we came up with this chart. The first thing on here is if your supervisor would not complete that I-9 requirement, they will not be reimbursed for anything at all. And the next section explains if they've turned in all their forms and they wish to be reimbursed, it goes through what would go on each form for each type of meeting. Some supervisors have chose to waive their per diem, meals, mileage, registration, but they still wish to receive registration fees or reimbursement for an overnight meeting, such as the annual meeting. So if that's the case, this explains which form would be completed for that type. And then we have the state employees category that we ask. Everything is going to be on a travel reimbursement, and we ask that it's on blue paper, just so it's sort of a flag to us that they're a state employee, because they're reimbursed a little bit differently than everybody else. And since I'm talking about the state employees, it was brought to our attention not too long ago that we're really not getting any paperwork from a state employee, since they're already, in the system. They've completed an I-9 for whoever their employer is. So we really weren't requiring them to turn anything in. But if they do want to be reimbursed, our accounts payable is requesting that we receive some type of documentation from them that they have on file. And so we decided that the easiest way to do this was probably have them complete a W-9, not the I-9, but a W-9 tax form that they would, put their social security number on, instead of having to send in a copy of their social security card or complete that I-9, that they need something on file to go along with their payments, that they can confirm their social security number. So that's not on the website yet, but I hope to get that up there this week. It just actually came up today with a state employee, so thought this would be a great time to let everybody know about that new requirement. I think, well, two more notes that I had on the timesheets. We're seeing a lot of they're not dated. They're signed, but they aren't being dated by the supervisor that's signing them, the board member. So if you could just double check before you're sending those in. And also on the mileage, if you could round to the nearest whole number, we can't enter like, 25.6 miles. We can only enter whole numbers. So if you could just round up on the mileage on any of the forms that you're putting the mileage on. And I think that was all the notes that I had. If anybody else has any questions or something, somebody would like me to go over a little more, I'd be glad to do that.
Megan, we do have a question in the chat asking if we can still email any forms or are they all back to being mailed in each month?
So we're still, if you're not holding your meetings in person, if they're still virtual, or you may have one or two board members maybe that are still calling in. If they're not coming to the office for the meeting, then we're okay with you signing them on their behalf. So if your entire board is meeting virtually, you can still email them. But anything that's being held in person, or like the annual meeting or area meetings, we need their signatures on them if they were able to attend those events in person. Only if they're calling in or a virtual meeting are we still allowing the admin or someone to sign on their behalf.
All right, Megan, then there's a question about the policy. Can you give more details on page 4, number 3C?
Let's see, let me get back to page 4. 3C. So I think, didn't even really notice this before, but I think a cover sheet for the area meeting would cover this. I think sometimes after an area meeting, the whichever district was responsible for that meeting will sometimes send us a list. But I think, this goes along with us just making sure that we're paying for the people that did attend the meeting and not someone that was not in attendance. So as long as you're completing a cover sheet for the area meeting, I think that covers that requirement.
One more question, Megan, that I see in the chat. Can the mileage only be counted from the supervisor's home or from their employment location?
I think it's wherever, if they left work to go to the meeting, I think that's how I would count it, wherever they've left from home or work. I've not had anyone ask that before. But it would make sense to me if they left work to go right to the meeting. That's fine.
All right, I'm not seeing anything else in chat at this point.
So I did, Kate, I had asked Casey to make a few notes too of some things that, and a couple things on the, like the I-9 and tax forms, like there should not be any white out. If there's an error, you can strike through an initial, but especially the I-9, we cannot accept it with any white out. We would have to return it. And I guess just if you're sending in, like, if you're not sending all of your, like, all your district board meeting or all your annual meeting in at one time. So you may send a cover sheet in the beginning, but then later you just sending in another form. If there's any kind of like different circumstance, if you could put a note as to maybe, you know, oh, I've already sent this in, or before you send them in, because when, you know, Casey's getting these forms in for, you know, 94, 95 areas, and she'll get a form in and or some paperwork, and she doesn't really know what it's for. And I might not either. So if it's something that you're sending in that's a little bit different, if you could include a note, it may alleviate some phone calls or emails. And one thing I was going to mention about that change, that we need the paperwork within 60 days. I believe, and Christina can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Eric Pear sends an email, like after the March commission meeting, if there were any new supervisors appointed, that kind of goes through everything that you would need from a new board member. And he does have in that email, he mentions about the paperwork that we will need to reimburse them. So if you have a new board member, if you could get everything from them on the same day, just, you know, talk to them before they come and let them know what they'll need to bring and fill out. It might help the process.
That's right,
Hey,
Megan. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is Heather. I know, I've done these in the past. The I-9, the example that we have has Megan's information on there, but it needs to be whoever's filling out the paperwork. So, like, it has Megan's title as admin officer too, but that needs to be the title of whoever's filling it out, and it doesn't need to have Megan's name. It needs to have the person's name. I've seen that a few times.
Yeah, that section on the I-9 is like you're completing that section saying that you are the person that saw their documents. So obviously we're not physically seeing them, so it has to be filled out by the person that saw their documents. But it'll be your name and title, but the address, the employer is agriculture. It's just the name and title will be whoever saw those documents.
Megan and Christina and Heather, this is Eric Pear. That was the first one I sent out with all the new stuff on it. If there's issues with it, just let me know and I'll change it or adjust it or whatever.
Yep, it looked good to me.
Awesome. Thank you.
Megan, there's a couple more questions in the chat. One is, how do you fill out paperwork for spot checks?
So the spot checks are reimbursed just like same as a district board meeting, but I know sometimes they'll do spot checks on the same day as a meeting. So you only get the per diem and mileage and meals for one day of service. So if you're both spot checks and meetings are on the same day, you only get that once. If you do your spot checks on a different day, it's the same as a local board meeting. And there is I believe there's a spot on that cover sheet to check for spot check. So if you're doing both on the same day, you would check the spot check box and district board meeting.
All right, and then related to spot checks, would you need a cover sheet?
Yes.
Okay, and then backing up one, if the district board state employee does not change, how often will they have to complete a W-9?
Just one time, just like the I-9, accounts payable just needs something on record that, as to why they're paying this person and that they have like the correct address, social security number. So we thought that was the easiest way rather than ask them to, find their social security card and get us a copy.
All right, and then Celeste has a question she's emailed. You mentioned that all forms need to be sent into Raleigh within 60 days after oath of office. Will you need additional paperwork if the supervisor is reelected and all paperwork on file remains the same? So we're going to have a lot of folks that start new terms in December. Do we need to re-up the I-9 and the tax forms at the beginning of every term?
No, the only time anything needs to be updated is if, their address changes, their direct deposit changes, but once they do all that paperwork initially, it doesn't have to be done again. And I guess I'm kind of glad you brought that up, just because we've been getting a lot of payments returned after the annual meeting from the Office of State Controllers that people's direct deposit information has changed since we paid them last. So if everybody could maybe, at the next meeting, ask their board members if their direct deposits changed. And a lot of them sometimes don't realize it has, if bank names have been changed or a bank has bought out a bank. They don't really realize that their information has changed. And we've had a couple address changes. So if you can email us. There's also a form that the board member would need to complete if the address changed. That doesn't happen too often, but some checks get returned from the payroll office. And that's, I guess, another thing I could mention. Anything that goes on that timesheet form goes through our payroll office, because anything on that timesheet is taxable. So it goes through payroll, and they had to create a system when we had to start doing this. So it does not have the ability to do direct deposit. So anything that goes on a timesheet is a paper check that is mailed. Anything that's on the travel reimbursement form, registration fees and overnight travel, goes through our accounts payable office, and they require direct deposit.
All right,
No.
Megan, I think that's all I see unless anyone else has questions.
I did think of one more thing. Make sure you're checking your dates on your forms. We especially notice this with state employees. We get forms that have the same date on them as a previous month. Like you may send in your March meeting, but it has a February date on it, which we've already paid. So make sure I think the forms get saved and dates may not necessarily get changed before they're printed. So just double check those before you're sending them in here. Well, if anybody else has any questions, I thank everybody for joining, and call us anytime that you have questions. We'd love to answer them. Head anything off before it gets here.
Hey, Megan,
Uh-huh,
it's Brandy in Chatham County. How are
uh-huh.
you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I was gonna catch you while everybody's leaving. The nutrient management training, where I'd seen that email about getting reimbursement for that.
Mm-hmm.
Since I haven't had that scenario come up before, how do we request a reimbursement for the money that the district has already paid? Is there a
Okay.
special form or something?
No, if the district's already paid, if you can get like, your finance office to, or I don't know, maybe you can do it, but we need something like on letterhead that says, what we're paying, who we're paying it to, like the tax ID or where they want the payment sent and like what we're paying for and how much, just sort of like an invoice, but on the county letterhead.
All right, yeah. So, D county letterhead. Okay. Cool. I think that's no problem. Thank you.
And then, yeah, you could just send that to me and I can get it to our accounts payable, to issue that payment.
All right. Awesome.
That'll be the first one. Nobody else has took us up on our offer.
Well, cool. Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can get that information, and sometimes it can be a little tricky. I feel like working with the finance department.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you again.
You're welcome.